Hey folks, you might have seen recently I upgraded to an absolutely monster 8K video editing PC for Premiere Pro use. I nicknamed it Cider House, the place that apples come to get crushed. But the Imac Pro is a serious piece of equipment, whatever you might think of its limitations. So, thanks to B&H Photo, they've sent me out a comparable model at about the same price point, and I'm going to run some real-world tests to see how they actually perform in crunching huge data files. Hey folks, before we jump into this, jump on over to macgranger.com/gear. You can check out my gear buying guide, and whilst you're there, you can sign up to my mailing list and I'll send you a free copy of my guide to improving your portraiture. Now, if you're someone who just loves seeing benchmarks and how different systems compare against each other on these standardized tests, I'm sorry, but this video is not for you. Benchmarks are kind of fun. It's interesting to see where your system ranks in the ratings around the world. But for me, I'm much more interested in testing out equipment in real world situations. In the same way I test my cameras on location in assignment, I want to compare these two computers using real conditions that people are actually editing in with real projects. So before that, let's actually just take a look around them and I'll give you a breakdown of the different spec comparisons. First off, let's take a look at the Imac Pro. This is the 2.5 gigahertz 14 core model, spec'd out at 128 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. It's got a 2 terabyte SSD and their top option in video card, the Pro Vega 64. Of course, it does have the 27-inch screen as part of it, that's 5K. It's got a UHS 2 SD card reader. It's got 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports via USB-C that can be also used for external displays, and 4 USB 3.0 ports. It's got the latest generation of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth inside and gigabit Ethernet. It's coming with full-size keyboard and mouse, which hilariously, because they're limited edition in color, have themselves become collector's items. And yes, comparing it to the standard iMac, it has got extra ventilation on it, which a lot of reviewers seem to be losing their mind about, but keep in mind this is a sealed system. The thermals are going to have to be pretty amazing to make sure this doesn't overheat, comparing the amount of airflow this system gets to the cider house. It's certainly a very, very beautiful machine though. Taking a look at cider house, this is running a Gigabyte X299 motherboard and a Core i9-7940X 3.1 gigahertz 14 core CPU. This has 256 gig of DDR RAM, so double what the iMac has. It's got the PNY Quadro P5000 16 gigabyte video card, and this has 4 display ports. It's capable of using 4 4K monitors or an 8K monitor. In terms of storage, I've got a 2 terabyte M2 NVMe SSD, another 2 terabyte 2.5 inch SSD, and then a 4 terabyte Western Digital Gold Platter drive. It also has a DVD rewritable drive in it, like most PCs do. It's in a Fractal Design R5 case with a Supernova 850 watt P2 power supply, and cooling is nice and simple with Noctua fans, Arctic cooling gel, and upgraded case fans. No other thermal things needed. This is running Windows 10 64-bit Pro. Now, in terms of I/O, on the back, this guy is loaded. We've got 4 USB 3.0 ports, a USB 3.1 port via USB-C, 4 USB 3.1s via traditional USB. It also has gigabit Ethernet. The video card has the 4 display ports that I mentioned, and I have an additional Thunderbolt 3 add-on card down below. And at the front, we've got an additional 2 USB 3.0 ports, 2 USB 2.0 ports, and another headphone and mic jack. And this actually comes in a bit more expensive at around $11,000. Now, it's not by any means spec to spec exactly comparable. What would be the point of that? We're talking about what can you get for your money. Now, these systems cost within a couple of $100s of each other, and it's a fair point that the iMac does have an integrated screen and Cider House didn't come with one. But we could afford one by cutting the hard drive and the second SSD that I have in Cider House, and then they would both have 2 terabytes worth of SSD in them. And then I'm left with much more RAM and a far superior video card inside of Cider House. And all of that extra connectivity. It's great that the iMac Pro, compared to their MacBook Pro, still has an SD card slot and it's got 4 USBs and 4 Thunderbolts, but when you compare it to the ports that Cider House has, especially in terms of USB connectivity, there's just no comparison, and of course the 4 display ports. Now, I really don't know how these tests are going to finally come out. The Macs are well optimized for their software, but I'm going to be using the exact same settings in Premiere Pro. That's what we're using. Of course, you would have the option of using Final Cut Pro if you're on the Apple, and there are other software out there, but I'm getting used to using Premiere, and it's kind of an industry standard for the kind of work that I'm doing. If you're not using Premiere, you can check out, there's a link in the caption. You can get a discount to try that out. Now, first of all, to test this out, today I'm actually putting together a file testing out some Leica camera equipment. It's got a bunch of different 4K video streams, high-res images, different audio tracks, some treatments on the video as well, and it comes in at about an 8.5 minute final 4K file. So let's export them at the same settings, doing it into H.264, and see the export time we achieve with each of the different machines. Now, note, I want this to be a real world test, and you know, the fact that they've got really fast SSDs, and the best practice would be to have your source files on one drive and your program on another and be exporting to another. That's how you're going to get the best performance possible, but that's not how it always works out. Real world editing can be a little bit messy. So I actually have the files being referenced from a bunch of different drives, including Thunderbolt 3, USB 3.1, USB 3, and USB 2. So we're going to be plugging in all those different devices into the different computers, and it's actually going to fill up just about all the USB ports. It will fill up all of the USB ports on the Mac and see how they actually do. Let's check it out. Okay, first up, let's put that multi-stream 4K clip to the test on the iMac. Both fully configured the same way to optimize and use the graphics cards. The iMac was able to export it in 23 minutes and 27 seconds, thereabouts, and it generated an 11.72 gigabyte file. Not too shabby. Quite impressively though, Cider House managed it in 12 minutes and 16 seconds, close to a 50% time saving. Okay, so that probably isn't a big surprise. That wouldn't be coming down to RAM, I don't think, because this wasn't a huge project, but the video card makes a huge difference. The P5000 video card that I have in Cider House is far superior to the iMac video card. Now for the next one, I actually am gonna throw together a project using Red Raw 8K footage. It's actually a mix of mostly 8K footage, but then some super slow-mo 4K footage as well. That I'm gonna throw some different grain and color treatments and metrics and all different things on there to make it quite a complicated file. Then we're gonna be down-resing that to make it an extra wide 4K file, because Red makes DCI 8K, which is wider than traditional. So it's gonna be wider than traditional 4K, and then we'll see how the two of them fare. Here, I think the RAM is gonna start to come into play. Here we go, running that 8K Red Raw footage through the iMac. You can see it's chewing through there. In the end, it took, was a bit slow there, about 25 minutes and 30 or 40 seconds. So a respectable result. To my surprise, Cider House managed to get it out in 16 minutes and 50 seconds. Not as big of a percentage difference as the first test, but still significant. But they were both excellent results. Here, taking a look using my latest generation, top of the line MacBook Pro, this actually took over an hour to be able to export the file the same as the other guys. Okay, so I'm kind of surprised that it was that big of a difference considering they are similarly priced, but on the other hand, not really. I named it Cider House for a reason. Now, having said that, I think the Mac is absolutely beautiful, and it is just an out-of-the-box and working solution. For mine, I worked with Puget Systems, and they made it into an out-of-the-box system for me by recommending different hardware and working with me to get what was going to work for my needs. But if you're going to build a PC by yourself, it becomes a lot less certain, unless you're a real expert, what components in tandem are actually going to give you overall the best performance. So there's pluses and minuses, and of course if you're building your own and something goes wrong, then you could potentially be dealing with a bunch of different vendors. If you go to Apple, it's going to be going just back to Apple, but if something goes down again with Puget Systems, then they're taking responsibility for the whole system, and it has lifetime workmanship and technical support, so that's great. Okay, so you might think a couple of minutes difference, does it really make a difference? Well, yes and no, especially with Premiere Pro. When you're exporting, the software is completely locked, so you can't start working on another project, for example, like you can with some other editing software. That was a fairly simple pair of projects we were working on. Some edits are going to take hours to export, so then paring down 40 or 50% of the export time really is going to make a difference to the productivity. And just think, a machine like that is meant to be generating income by putting work through it for clients. So if you can get double the number of projects exported in a day, that actually does have a potential impact on your balance sheet. And the other, I think, critical thing is they're both hugely expensive, and they're both, more than what most people need. But in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, whenever, they're both also going to be out of date. And Cider House, I can take the door off and upgrade any of the different components at any time that I want. When this cryptocurrency nonsense dies off and video card prices drop again, if I wanted to upgrade to the P6000 or whatever comes next, or add in a couple of different video cards, I can just do it. If I want to upgrade a bunch of different components, I can change the power supply out, keep most of the components, and just upgrade things as I want. And I don't have that option with the iMac. The other thing is, it has a really nice screen, for sure, 5K 27-inch, but I don't have any option in that, and it still doesn't have the color gamut of the really high-end monitors. Of course, you're going to be paying extra for that, but it kind of depends how long of a term proposition you're looking at. If I'm looking at this as, say, a 5-year proposition, I can upgrade Cider House and change my monitor if I wanted to, and have pretty much a new up-to-date system again in a couple of years' time. With the Imac Pro, I'd probably be looking at upgrading the whole system overall, because you can't just upgrade individual components, and then I'm doubling my cost. Sometime this year, they're going to be bringing out the Mac Pro that everyone is hoping is going to be modular, so perhaps that is the option for people who want to have upgradability. Just keep in mind, replacement parts for them are still, in the past, hugely expensive in terms of, and you're really limited in terms of what your different compatible components are, and you're not going to have that limitation with a custom PC build. Let me know your thoughts, let me know what you're working on and what kind of video work or stills work you're crunching personally, and what your system is, and I'll see you soon with more photo and tech videos very soon.